game would look in a 4-player match. This is the family-friendly version of the game, and the only reason that it's called that is because you're not going to have any cards in your hand. That's just going to allow you to focus on the board itself, and I know that this still looks a little confusing, but it's actually a very simple game to understand. What I'm going to do is show you roughly how the game is played, and give you a basic understanding on how you would perform actions during your turn. This would be your player board, this would be your farm. You would start out with 2 houses and 2 workers. And the gist of the game is that you're going to be taking your workers and you're going to be placing them on all these spaces or of your choice during that turn to try to acquire resources or food to feed your family members. If you were the starting player, you would start out with 2 pieces of food that you would keep in your storehouse. And the reason that food is important is because at the end of each harvest, you're going to have to feed your people. Each person requires 2 pieces of food. And I'll explain a little bit more of that as the game goes. So on your turn, you're going to take one of your people, place them somewhere on the board. But right before that happens, you're going to flip over the very first card on this row. And the reason is because these cards are going to denote seasons, and as seasons pass, then you have to come to the harvest where you feed your people. And if you notice, the harvest, as the game progresses, gets quicker and quicker. So at the beginning of the game, you go through 4 cards, then you'll go through 3, then 2, then 2, then 2, and then finally just 1 before the harvest comes. So you always want to make sure you have plenty of food on stock to be able to feed your people. You can feed them with these, or you can also build fireplaces. And the way that you'd get fireplaces is, as the game progresses, you'd be able to purchase one for whatever it states up here in this corner. At the end of the game, if this is still in front of you, you could get 1 victory point extra. But what this allows you to do is convert each one of these types of materials, animals or vegetables, into that many food. Or you can try to bake bread and convert it into that many food with the grain. Acquiring resources, like the wood here, allows you to build fences. To build a fence, you would place a person here, and then however many pieces of wood, that's how many fence pieces it would allow you to build. Each one of these sides requires 1 piece of wood. And you want to use them wisely because you only get 15 of them, and once they're placed on the board, you're not allowed to move them. The reason you'd want to build fences is because that's the way that you would store animals. And as the rounds continued, animals would eventually pop up. As such, the sheep. The sheep is always the first one that comes on the game. And if you place there, and as long as you had the fence, you could take that sheep and put him right there. You would then want to try to build possibly a stable. Because the reason is because each one of these pastures that are fenced in can only hold 2 of the same type of animals. If you put a stable and build it in there, you can double that capacity, and you can have up to 4. The other thing you want to do is build more houses. And the way that you would do that is you would pay for a wooden hut 5 pieces of wood and 2 pieces of reed to the bank, and then you'd be allowed to take a wooden hut and place it anywhere on the board. That helps you to try to expand your family as well, because you can never expand your family until you have built a house unless the card that you place on specifically states otherwise. To be able to add a family member, you'd have to wait till the card popped up, which is right here. If you placed there, and if you had a room available, you'd be able to take another one of these flat people and round people and place them in one of your rooms. You have to remember though, you got to feed these people, because if ever the harvest comes around and you don't have enough food to feed them, then you have to take begging cards for every piece of food that you cannot feed your people. And that counts as negative points at the end of the game, as denoted right there. The other thing that you're going to do is you're going to build farms. To be able to build farms, you'd want to place here. That would allow you then to plow a field. And you would place it anywhere on your farm just like that. Then what you would want to try to do is you'd want to try to take a piece of grain, or in later rounds, vegetables will pop up. Right there. But let's say, for instance, you want to take this piece of grain and you want to keep it in your storehouse. What you'd want to do then is try to sow that piece of grain onto a field. And to do that, you would take your piece of grain, put it on, take 2 pieces of grain out of the bank, and stack them on top just like that. What that allows you to do is that at the end of each harvest, you get to take the top piece of grain off and add it to your storehouse, just like that. Each piece of grain can count as a piece of food for you, or you can turn it and convert it into bread. Remember the bread? Down here at the bottom of the card. To bake bread, you can also place onto that card, and you could convert that food into, or that grain into pieces of bread. The other thing that you can do is you can try to upgrade your houses as well. And as all the cards are flipping over, you're going to get different types of animals, and you're going to be able to get different types of resources. To be able to upgrade your house, you just look here and it tells you. To upgrade to a clay house, you would have to pay, actually it would be right here. This is the good card to use. You would pay one type of the type of resource you're upgrading to. So let's say you're going from wood to brick, because you do have to do these in progressive order. You can never go from wood to stone. But if you're going from wood to brick, you'd have to pay one piece of brick for each piece, or each room of your, each one of the rooms. I'm sorry, I was trying to spit that out and I couldn't. So you would get that and you'd be able to flip them over just like that. And then you would also have to pay reed as well, as denoted here at the top. And then to be able to go to stone, you'd have to pay just the stone, and you'd remove these and you'd place the stone there. And the only reason you're going to do that is for scoring purposes at the end of the game. You can also take the vegetables, and if you try to plow a field, the vegetables would work the exact same way as what the grain does. You would take your vegetable and you would sow it onto the field, take 2 extra vegetables and place them on there as well, and then at the end of each harvest you would take a vegetable off and put it in your storehouse. Or you'd be able to turn it into food with your fireplace here. There's different kinds of fireplaces too, and all kinds of different cards, and they give you different types of benefits and also different amounts of victory points at the end of the game. The game would continue until finally the last card was flipped over. Everybody would do their placement, everybody would feed their people, and then the game would end. Here's where it gets interesting. You don't want to have open spaces on your farm. For every open space you have, you would get negative points. And you want to get all the 3 different types of animals and as many of the grains and vegetables in your storehouse as you possibly can. You also want to make as many people as you can and as many rooms. And everything is stated here, because for every field that you have, your points, for if you don't have a field, you'd get negative, but then the points would go up depending on how many fields you have. Same with pastures, so that the fields would be your plowed fields. Pastures is your fenced-in areas with your animals. Then your grains, your vegetables, sheep, wild boar, and cattle. You'd get negative one point for every unused space on your farm. So each one of these, if this was my final result, I'd get a very bad score. For every piece of harvested grain or, for every fenced-in stable, which is this right here, I would get bonus points. And also if I had a clay hut. Well, I'm at stone right now, so I would get 1 point for clay huts. But for every stone hut, I would get 2 points. And lastly, for every family member I had, I would get 3 points per family member. You would also add up the victory points on any of the cards that you purchased from over here. Whoever has the most victory points wins the game.